and we'll start with some notations. So I have already written the notation here, and let me explain what I mean by the notations. So first of all, so this we have this assumption that characteristic of field is 0 and algebraically closed field, and L is semi-simple Lie algebra over F that you understand very well. We'll fix a maximal toral subalgebra, which we also call Cartan subalgebra. So one can define in general Cartan subalgebra in any Lie algebra, and it is supposed to be a nilpotent subalgebra which is self-normalizing, of which normalizer is itself. But it turns out that in the case of semi-simple Lie algebra, it's always a maximal toral subalgebra. So the both definitions are same in this case. So I can call it either Cartan subalgebra or a maximal toral subalgebra. Okay, so once you have a maximal toral subalgebra, one can write down Cartan decomposition for L. So Cartan decomposition, we have already seen that. So L is H. So how do you write that? You have add map from L to GL of L, and then you look at H contained in L, and every element of H is semi-simple and it's commutative, so you can simultaneously diagonalize that here. That gives you this decomposition. So L is H direct sum over L alpha and alpha in H star, and all those alpha in H star for which L alpha is not 0, that you denote by phi. That is our root system. So phi is set of all alpha in H star such that L alpha is not 0. And it turns out that this phi is a root system. So given any Lie algebra, semi-simple Lie algebra, we associate a root system. Sorry? Yeah, I have written H separately. So this alpha is not 0 here. Alpha is not 0. Yeah. So turns out that phi is a root system. And then there is a general theory of root system which you have been already doing parallelly. Then corresponding to phi, we can write down, we can find a simple roots, and then I'll denote this simple roots by alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha L, and then we have corresponding positive roots which are supposed to be just positive integral combinations, rather non-negative integral combination of elements from simple roots. So that I will denote by pi. Sometimes I will write phi plus, so whatever, it will be the same thing. Okay, so till here you roughly know, it's already done in the class. Yeah, so by the way, there need not be unique H maximal toral subalgebra. This is not usually unique. So you could find many such H and write down decomposition, this Cartan decomposition. So then question comes that you will get different phi probably, right? So what is the relation between them? But there is a general theory, structure theory, which will say that all Cartan subalgebras are conjugate. So then it doesn't matter which H you start with. Yeah. So there is a choice involved here, and there is another choice we make here, because we already seen in the general theory that given a root system, there are many ways to choose a simple root. It's not unique again. So it depends on which Weil chamber you choose. So again there is a choice involved, right? Okay, so let me explain what do I mean by a Borel subalgebra. So let's write down definition of Borel subalgebra. So a Borel subalgebra is denoted as a B. It's a subalgebra of L. So B is a maximal solvable subalgebra. So any maximal solvable subalgebra is called Borel. Yeah, and there will be a general theorem which will prove that all Borel subalgebras are conjugate. Yeah. So this is a structure theory basically, and it will be proved sometime later. Sorry? Okay. So I am not going to define everything right now, but there are automorphisms, inner automorphisms, under that it will be conjugate. So we will define automorphisms of Lie algebra. There are various automorphisms, and under that it will be conjugate. Okay. So once I give you this data here, starting from this data, once you fix the simple roots, you can actually write down a Borel subalgebra. Okay. So let's see how do you write that Borel subalgebra. So we fix H, so we get a phi, and then we fix again a simple root inside that. So there are two steps of choices involved there. Once you have fixed all that, then I can write a B. So my claim is that if I look at B equal to H direct sum L alpha, alpha greater than 0. Okay. So rather than writing alpha greater than 0, okay, I will also, just to sort in the notation, when I write alpha greater than 0, I mean alpha is an element of positive root system. Okay. So my claim is that this is a Borel subalgebra. First of all, it's a subalgebra of L. So claim B is a Borel subalgebra of L. So why is it a subalgebra? Sorry? Yeah, so if you take brackets of two things, they get summed up. So if you take L alpha and L beta, they will go to L alpha plus beta. And since I have taken all positive ones, they are anyway there. And H is nothing but L0. So you are adding 0 to some alpha, then you will be just in that alpha. So the bracket is squeezed out. So it's a subalgebra. Yeah, so it's subalgebra, that is clear. Why it's Borel? So to prove it's a Borel subalgebra, you have to prove first it's a solvable subalgebra, and then you have to prove it's maximal. So let's see why it's solvable. So why it's solvable? You have to take bracket and then see what is the next step. So let's claim that bracket of B with itself is contained in direct sum of L alpha, alpha greater than 0. So then there is no H part. Is that clear why? So take any general element here and commute with another element of that kind, and you will see that it goes to, so let's remember the general rule. If you are L alpha and you want to commute with L beta, then it goes inside L alpha plus beta, including 0 also. So if I had element from 0, then it will go to L alpha, and then if I have alpha and beta, then it goes to alpha plus beta. So then you will see that there is no H part here if I want to take commutator from 2 elements B. And if I do further, then we will see that it goes to, so the simple roots won't be there. It will go to all 2 alpha or alpha plus beta. And so it increases by height. So we have defined height, right, for the root system. So the height increases every time when you take commutator. And since everything is of finite height, at certain steps, it will become all 0. So it's a solvable subalgebra. The proof clear? So this you can say is actually direct sum of L alpha, alpha in phi, and height of alpha is greater than or equal to 1. And then if I take further commutator, so let's call it B1. Then if I take commutator of B1 with B1, then it will be contained in direct sum of L alpha and height of alpha greater than or equal to 2. Yeah. So once again, if you take commutator, again the height will increase. So it's a solvable subalgebra. Yeah, every element is nilpotent in fact here. So you can again use that. This side. Yeah, so in fact it will be nilpotent. This bracket BB itself is a nilpotent Lie algebra now. So one can use again one of the corollary to say that it's again a solvable subalgebra. But you can just compute here without using that, and you can see that. And why it's maximal? So B is a maximal solvable. So suppose it's not maximal, there is solvable subalgebra containing B, say K containing B, this is K is solvable, then what? So it already contains H and it contains all positive L alpha. So what else it has to contain? It has to contain some negative L alpha. And as soon as it contains some L minus alpha, you take L minus alpha, L alpha, and throw in H alpha. This will form a copy of SL2. Yeah. Sorry, one second.
Saying that maybe K will contain an element L minus alpha, but it will contain a combination of L minus alpha.
Okay. Yeah. So it need not be exactly L minus alpha, but some combination of that. But then choose one of them, one of the element from there, and then take bracket with the other side positive alpha. It has to be again H invariant because H is contained in B anyway. So H will be contained in K anyway. So even if it is sum is there, you can again make H act on that and extract one of them. Some one y minus alpha. It's acting semi-simply, right? So you will always find some L minus alpha there. Okay. So yeah, so suppose it's not exactly L minus alpha, right? Not exactly some y alpha content there. It could be some of those elements. But K contains H again. So you make h act on them again, but h has to scale each one of them. So as soon as sum is there, all the scalar multiples of each element has to be there. Make it act by h. So you can extract out.
That will kill all but one. That will kill all the two.
Not kill, but scale by different scalars, right? Then you can subtract and then extract out one of them. It's a subalgebra. It has to be closed under addition.
Or will kill because the function is add to function is span the space and the alpha span x star. So you can make it.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay, this is an exercise for tutorial. So we'll go through this proof again in the tutorial. This is an exercise. Prove that B is a Borel subalgebra. Okay, so now it makes sense what I have written here, Borel subalgebra, and it will depend on this delta. So such Borels are called standard Borel. We'll call it standard Borel because we have fixed a root system. We have fixed the simple roots. Depending on that, I have written a Borel subalgebra. All right, and this I have already defined. UL is universal enveloping algebra of L. All right, so let's now define what is the meaning of a representation for L. Representation. So representation of a Lie algebra is a map phi from L to GL of B, where B is a vector space over field F, and phi is a Lie algebra homomorphism. So what do you mean by Lie algebra homomorphism? So GLV, I am taking all endomorphisms of V to itself. So I can, so this becomes an algebra in usual sense because I have composition defined. So then I can give it a Lie algebra structure by defining xy minus yx equal to bracket of xy. So this has that obvious Lie algebra structure, and this, with respect to that, it should be homomorphism, Lie algebra homomorphism. So this is what we mean by a representation for the Lie algebra L, or sometimes also this is called V is an L module. So instead of calling it a linear map which preserves Lie algebra structure, one can write down all the things in detail and say that it has to satisfy all those properties. So there is an action of L. So there is a map from L cross V to V, which has to satisfy all the several properties, in turn to make this exactly as a Lie algebra homomorphism. So that is a representation of Lie algebra. Notice that I have not said V is always V is finite dimensional. So in general, we will come across even infinite dimensional vector spaces which are going to be representations for Lie algebras. Okay, so we have already defined something earlier, which is universal enveloping algebra of a Lie algebra L. So what is the relation with a Lie algebra and its universal enveloping algebra? So this was actually one of the exercises in the tutorial sheet, so you might have done already. So if I have a representation phi from Lie algebra to GL of V, then it is equivalent to having V a left UL module. Now UL is just an associative algebra with identity. But only problem is that UL is infinite dimensional. So it's usual now module theory over this algebra. This is a ring now. So we'll go back and forth between these definitions. So you should be clear about this definition, this equivalence. Is that clear to everyone? You thought about it already? Yeah. Anyone who is not sure about this equivalence? This follows from the universal property of UL. Okay, now we are going to make few more definitions. First definition is when, so this is definition. V is irreducible representation if V has no proper invariant, L invariant subspace. Right, and one more definition. We already seen definition of complete reducibility. You have seen already this definition, right? You also seen the definition of complete reducibility. When do we call a representation completely reducible? Louder. If it can be written as direct sum of irreducible representations. Yeah? Definition makes sense anyway. Yeah. So yeah, I will come to that theorem. So we also proved a theorem. So we'll come to this. Before that, I will give one more definition. So let's define what is called indecomposable. So when do we call a representation indecomposable? If it is not direct sum of P is called indecomposable. If it cannot be written as direct sum of 2 L invariant subspaces or submodules or other sub-representations. To proper L, one can say proper, but of course you don't want 0. Is that all right? So what do you say? Are these two things same, irreducible and indecomposable, or they are different? So which one implies which one? One of the ways would be obvious. Irreducible implies indecomposable. What about other way around? What? Semi-simple algebra. Okay, so in general the other way around need not be true, even in the finite group cases, modular theory situation. But there are certain situations when I can write every representation as a direct sum of irreducible, that is every representation is completely reducible, but that happens only in certain situations. So let's write down, that's a theorem of Weil. So suppose I have representation phi from Lie algebra L to GL of V. L is semi-simple and V is finite dimensional. Then V is completely reducible. So it's a nice situation because in this situation only you need to find all irreducible representations. If this kind of situation is not there, then things are more difficult, right? So they are, sorry?
Decomposable doesn't imply reducible.
Yeah.
In characteristic 0, for characteristic P we can take the GL, GLM, P GL, GLP combined, SLP combined.
Yeah. Okay, so before going further, let's write down a couple of examples which we already have seen. So give me examples of representations. Example number 1. Any example? So we already classified what? All irreducible or only finite dimensional irreducible? So we have classified already all finite dimensional irreducible representations of SL2. And in general, we have been always working with this representation add from L to GL of L. This is a natural representation for L. And also we have been restricting this representation to H, and we have further decomposed L as a direct sum of certain submodules with respect to this map. So we have been already working with this kind of representations. Yeah. Okay, let's see how far we can do that. So let's write down some general definitions. So suppose I have a situation that V is finite dimensional representation So finite dimensional representation means I have map phi from L to GL of V. So we will do the similar thing what we have been doing with add. Let's try to do that, so that we decompose V in a smaller subspaces, and hopefully things will be easier to handle. So L contains H, so I can restrict phi on H. But H is a Maxwell Torus subalgebra, so every element is semi-simple and it's commutative. So I can simultaneously diagonalize its image here. So I can write down V as a direct sum of certain subspaces. So since phi of H is direct sum of V, say lambda, and lambda will be element of H star. And what is V lambda? V lambda is set of all those elements of V on which the elements of H acts by the scalar lambda of H. So H acts on V by scalar lambda of H V. So H dot V I mean by looking at phi of H of V. So I will just simplify it and write H dot V. Sorry? Yeah. So this is for every H in H. Yeah. So this we can always do. We can decompose V as direct sum of certain subspaces, and these will be called weight spaces. And whenever V lambda is not 0, such lambda will be called weights. Yeah. Whenever V lambda is not 0, lambda is called a weight. Of course, weight of that representation, because it depends on phi, and V lambda a weight space. So this decomposition we could write because V is finite dimensional. Is it always true that if V is infinite dimensional also I can write this decomposition? So now question. What if V is not finite dimensional? Can we still write this decomposition? Sorry, what? Right. Yeah. So that fails in general. So in general you need not be able to write it as a direct sum, but still this definition makes sense. I can always try to define V lambda for some lambda in H star. Yeah. So let's do that. So in general, we don't have direct sum decomposition. But still V lambda makes sense. So what we do, we take a subspace, let's call it V dash, which is sum of all V lambda. What can we say about this subspace? This need not be whole V, this will be sub of V. So claim is that first of all this sum is always direct sum for lambda different. So number 1, V dash is in fact a direct sum of V lambdas, and number 2, V dash is an L submodule. And why is that so? Yeah. So we'll prove this claim in one go with the following lemma. So let me write this lemma. And V is an L module. Then L alpha maps V lambda to V lambda plus alpha. So let's prove this. This is for any V, finite or infinite. We won't make use of any more finiteness of V or anything. So how do we prove this? So let's take some element x in L alpha and some element V in V lambda, and we want to see where x dot V belongs. So we have to show that x dot V belongs to L lambda plus alpha. This is in V lambda plus alpha. So let's make it act by H. So H acting on x dot V is what we have to find out. since it's a Lie algebra homomorphism, this is same as action of Hx on V. But Hx, since it's a representation, it's going to be xh minus bracket hx. Yes. So what will happen to this? X acting on HV. V is an element of V lambda. So H acts on V by lambda of H, right? So this will be X lambda of H V minus what about bracket HXV? What about that? So bracket Hx you can make use of the add, right? So what is this? Alpha of Hxv. This is going to be alpha of Hxv. So we get what we want. So this is going to be lambda h minus alpha h of xv. Xh plus hx. Good. At least you are good, but still you are awake. So we get xv in v lambda plus alpha. So now make use of this here. If I take something v lambda and make act by any element of L, it will go to again some weight space only. So direct sum of weight spaces. Okay, we have not yet proved this direct sum, but sum of weight spaces again it belongs to the same sum. So this is going to be L submodule. And why it's a direct sum? Yeah, the same proof. If the vectors correspond to different eigenvalues, then they are linearly independent. The same proof you can use here. So it becomes direct sum. Okay, so now we are going to define a certain kind of module, so our main goal is to find all finite dimensional module. We want to classify finite dimensional module for any semi-simple Lie algebra, and somehow that is done via finding certain infinite dimensional modules and taking its quotient. So we have no choice but to go to that. So we will naturally construct some infinite dimensional infinite modules, and then making use of that, among that we will classify all finite dimensional irreducible ones. So that's the way we are going to do things. So let me define what is called standard cyclic module. These are also called highest weight modules. But Humphreys writes always standard cyclic modules, so we'll just write that. So to define what is a standard cyclic module or a highest weight module, before that I have to define what is the maximal vector. So let me give definition of maximal vector. So definition of maximal maximal vector of weight lambda. So suppose I have V, which is an L module. So an element will denote as V plus in V lambda is called a maximal vector of weight lambda if L alpha acting on V plus is 0 for all alpha positive. Yeah, is the definition clear? See, by a representation we mean that every element of L is acting on the vectors of V. So the maximal vector is the one on which all positive root spaces, all positive L alpha, they act by 0, they make it 0. If there is such a vector, then we will call that vector maximal vector, and if that vector is in some V lambda, we will call maximal vector of weight lambda. So it need not exist, there is no guarantee when it exists and when it does not exist. We are not saying anything about that right now. We are also not saying whether it is unique or it is not unique. So all kind of things can happen in general. So this is also equivalent way of looking at this is, if I want to make elements, if you want to make act elements of H, suppose H is in H, you want to make H act on V plus, what do we get? What do we get possibly? It is anyway in V lambda, so it has to be scalar multiple of V. So basically it is equal to lambda H of V plus, scalar multiple of that, and all alpha positive act by 0. So I can make act by any element of Borel, right? I can take the Borel, standard Borel with respect to the root system, which I have fixed, my notations are fixed, I have fixed the delta and Borel. So I can make act that Borel, what do I get? How does Borel act on V plus? So yeah, so the only the semi-simple part, like the standard diagonal part will act on this by scalars, other part will act by 0. So BV plus is just going to be scalars and nothing else, right? So it is going to be a simultaneous eigen vector for B. So my claim is that, so let us write down it as a claim. If V is finite dimensional, maximal vectors exist. So I have representation phi from L to GLV. And I have Borel content here, the standard Borel, and my claim is that there exists maximal vector, meaning I have to find a vector in V which is a common eigen vector for every element of B. If I can do that, I am done. And does that exist always? Any idea why?
Takes a vector from V dot E lambda and it by x from L out from L alpha. They are finding in L alpha.
I want simultaneously.
Given the function and the dot of the function on the positive will आगे आपका मुझे हो जाता है इससे बोला कि लैम्डा is maximum lambda.
Can use these things.
Yeah. Lee's theorem is ready made for this. Let's recall what is Lee's theorem. So if you have solvable Lie algebra acting on a finite dimensional vector space, you always have a common eigenvector. Yeah, that's exactly what we want here. So there exists V plus in V such that B of V plus is contained in. And furthermore, bracket of BB is always nilpotent there. I mean, the Lee's theorem, the general Lee's theorem will say that bracket BB is nilpotent. So in fact, the elements of bracket BB will act on this by 0. So all, and the bracket BB is just sum of L alphas, removing H. So L alpha will act on this B plus as 0. Yeah, so you have to use full strength of Lee's theorem. Yeah, is that clear? Bracket BB. Yeah, bracket BB is n. So it's general exercise. We'll do that in tutorial session. Okay, so right now I have defined what is a maximal vector of weight lambda. So this claim says that if I have finite dimensional spaces, then I can find maximal vectors basically. So it exists in at least finite dimensional representations. Now I am going to define highest weight modules. Let's see how much time I have. Okay, I have enough time. So I'm going to define standard cyclic modules, or also called highest weight module. So I have a module V, which is an L module, is called highest weight module or standard cyclic module. module if there exists V plus a maximal vector of some weight, say lambda, such that V is actually equal to UL times V plus. UL is universal enveloping algebra. Yeah, is the definition clear? So something to be standard cyclic module, we should be able to find a maximal vector of weight, say some lambda V plus, and make act by all elements of L, and we get all vector space V. UL times V plus means, so what is the basis of UL? Recall PBW theorem. The basis of UL is nothing but repeatedly applying the elements of L. You should be able to take, any kind of product of elements of L, basis of L. So it's equivalent to saying that you want to multiply the elements of L any number of times and apply on V plus. So then such a module we will call standard cyclic module. We don't know whether it exists always or there is always one, or for what lambdas they exist. So let's see some properties of such modules. Then we'll worry about its existence. So we'll prove that there exist such modules for every weight lambda, in fact. But before that, let's look at some properties of this kind of modules. Any question? So let's write down certain properties of this kind of modules and prove them. So here is a theorem. So let V be highest weight L module with maximal vector V plus and V lambda, and let phi plus with elements of this kind beta 1, beta 2 to beta m. Then A. V is always spanned by the vectors of this kind. So look at y, beta 1 I1, y beta m Im acting on V plus such that these ij's are positive integers. In particular, V is direct sum of its weight spaces. That where? Oh, standard cyclic module. So it's the same notation. Yeah, it's the same name. That's why I written there. Standard cyclic module. So I think modern terminology is now it's called highest weight module, but Humphreys calls it standard cyclic module. Yes. So again, maybe I should write here notation. So I have Cartan decomposition here for L, and then root system. So the elements. So we know that each L alpha is one dimensional, right? So we'll choose element X alpha in L alpha, and the element, then one can choose an element Y alpha in L minus alpha, and in such a way that H alpha forms gives me those kind of things, such that X alpha, Y alpha and H alpha forms SL2 copy. So this is my notation. Yeah. So X alphas are for positive alpha. So for alpha belongs to phi plus. So one can take any X alpha, but then one can choose Y alpha in L minus alpha, such that this bracket will be automatically in H alpha, but such that these three elements make SL2 copy. This choice can be done. This was proved yesterday in I think Upendra's class. So the notation is that Y alpha is element of L minus alpha. So whenever I say Y beta, it's the element of L minus beta. Because beta 1, beta 2 are the positive things. They are non-negative linear combination of these alpha i's. Yeah, I am not saying that beta 1, beta 2 should be in any order. So yeah, so I should not say these are like. Yeah, they can repeat. So I have said the same 1 to m. So that's not the case. Let's either change this m. Let's call it something else. Maybe some n. So ij's could be 0. Yeah, ij's could be 0. Let's allow that. Then some of the beta i's are not there, and then you can permute by taking brackets. So it's fine. Yeah, this notation is all right. No problem. So here I am allowing these integers could be zeros. That means that one is not there, and I can always put them in order by applying bracket. See. No. That is the next thing we are going to write down. See, whenever I have xy, I can always write it as yx plus the bracket of xy. So which is one lower dimension here. So whenever I see xy, then I can, if I want to switch the order, I can always apply this. So that's why putting them in order beta 1, beta 2, beta m is still fine, right? This is happening in UG. That's why UL. That's why I have written here UL times V plus. Okay, let me write down more properties and then we'll prove this. So let's write down part B. The weights of V are of the form mu equal to lambda minus Ki alpha. But they will involve lower number of things. No, one, sorry, what do you mean?
The bracket after V plus.
Yeah. Okay, I will clarify in a moment. Let me write it down. So it becomes n minus. Basically, it's again a subalgebra. It's an nilpotent subalgebra. So the weights of V are of the form always lambda minus some combination of alpha i's, k i's, where k i's are greater than or equal to 0. So on these elements, basically, I have to calculate weight, and you will see that you get that. That is, all weights mu are always less than lambda. I mean less than or equal to lambda basically. Lambda is the only one which is equal to that. See, for every mu in H star, dimension of V mu is always finite, and in particular dimension of V lambda is 1. Each submodule of V is the direct sum of its weight spaces. Part E, V is always indecomposable module. With a unique maximal submodule. Proper submodule and a corresponding unique irreducible quotient. Unique. And part F, let me write down here. Every homomorphic image is again standard cyclic. Is again standard cyclic. Of same weight actually, of weight lambda. So these are the properties of standard cyclic modules basically, what we defined just now, and let's prove it one by one.
I'm sorry, what's this lambda here or any lambda?
So the definition itself of standard cyclic, it itself comes with some V plus and some lambda. So we have not constructed anything yet. We are just writing down some properties of such modules. Yes. So the PBW theorem, we choose an order and then write down the basis, right? So this is the proof. So we'll write the basis for L in this order. So first we write down y beta 1 and y beta m, then h. So h again I will write h alpha 1, h alpha L, and then we'll write x beta 1, x beta m. So this part spans B, Borel, and this part gives me n. This part is my h, and actually this part again gives me a Borel, which is denoted as B minus. And again like this, it is some n minus, you can write this as n minus. This is again a subalgebra. That's the point. Right? And this was again one of the exercise that if I want to look at only certain part of a, so in general, if I have Lie algebra and if I take subalgebra, then what is the relation between UL and UH? That was one of the exercise. Yeah. In fact, you can write down the generating set. It will be just those, taking all the products of only those elements which doesn't involve H. They will be giving you the coset, generating set. So notice that here I have said that we spanned by the vectors. I am not saying that this is a basis. I am just saying that it is spanned by those vectors. Right? So we know that I can write down UL as UN minus into UB, n minus, not inverse. Yeah. So now if you apply for writing V is nothing but UL times V plus. So this is same as UN minus times V plus. So you get part A. Now the basis, the spanning set will involve only elements of n minus. So only this. So that's why you see this kind of elements generate this, span this.
Because if there is an X or whatever, it will be plus.
Yeah. Even if X was somewhere else, even if X was somewhere else, that is part of the PBW theorem, that it can be commuted and brought at the other side. So you don't see them. Sorry? This? Yeah, so in beginning I said that if I take positive roots and choose elements in them, x beta I is combined with H, that's a Borel. This is what we proved in the beginning. In fact, you can take H and you can take all the negative ones, that is also a Borel, right? The same proof. So whenever I have a positive Borel, whenever I fix a root system and a positive root system, then I have positive Borel and I also have negative Borel. This will be called negative Borel. That's generally definition. And this part is also nilpotent Lie algebra. And here also this part is nilpotent Lie algebra. So this will be like standard notation. That's why I have put it as n minus m and b and b minus. Okay, so that proves part of part A. And claim is that each of these are going to be weight spaces. Because recall the lemma which we proved just now. L alpha acting on any V lambda, this goes to V lambda plus alpha. So, we will make use of this. So, if I have an element of this kind here, where will this belong? We have to repeatedly make act y betas basically, right? And V plus belongs to already V lambda. So, when I make act by y beta, say m, on V plus, this belongs to V lambda, this belongs to minus beta m. Beta m is a positive root, y beta m is part of L minus beta m. So, this belongs to V lambda minus beta m. If I apply it say I m times, then this will become I m times here. So, if I make it act by various y beta i's, I1, then this will belong to V lambda minus summation of ij beta j. So, the weight of this element, say this element belong to V mu, then the mu is this. But then beta j's are positive roots, I can again write them as a non-negative linear combination of alpha i's. So, this is again lambda minus some other say ki alpha I, where ij's were positive and this is non-negative linear combination. So, all these things are positive again. So, ki's are positive integers. Sorry. Alpha is their simple roots, that is fixed notation. So, this side here I have fixed this notation, alpha is our simple roots. As a non-negative linear combination. So, again ki's will be positive because ij's are positive. So, that gives me part B, and it also gives that which direct sum of weight spaces, because each vector has its weight, which is mu, this lambda minus this summation. That's part B. Okay, I still have 10 minutes, right? So, all weights are less than equal to lambda because I am subtracting something. Yeah. So, all weights are of weight less than lambda. That's why it's called highest weight. So, lambda is the highest weight in that module. Lambda is the largest possible weight because everything else mu is less than lambda here. And you can see the part C follows from here. If I want to fix some mu and want to see all the vectors of weight mu, then that mu has to be equal to certain lambda minus summation k alpha is. So, how many positive integers you can substitute? Only finitely many, right? You want solution of this equation in positive integers. Now, you are only allowed to vary ki's. So, there could be finitely many only. So, the dimension of V mu is always finite. And if I want it equal to lambda and I want all ki positive, so there is only one solution 0, 0, 0. So, dimension of V lambda is always 1. There is only one vector which is V plus itself and nothing else.
For each choice you have exactly one dimension. If you span by V plus.
No, I have a highest weight module V. In that module, V plus is the only highest, up to scalar it is the only highest weight vector. All other vectors which are not linearly independent of that, they are of some lower weight.
No, what I'm saying is, in fact, the dimension of V is the number of ways you can write mu as lambda minus.
Yeah, so lambda is fixed anyway. Lambda is fixed. So only thing I can vary ki is, which has to be positive integers.
No, and for each choice of that, you have exactly one contribution to dimension of V.
Yes. No. Wait.
Or at most one.
So so anyway, they have to be obtained by applying various y beta i's again. So it may not be one, but it could be finitely many, because one has to apply various y beta i's also. Of is that clear?
Suppose an integral combination beta is a 0, then some of the coefficients have to be negative, right? Because
Yeah.
But then that seems to imply that every weight space will be one dimension.
Every weight space is,
Because if you can get mu using two different combinations.
yeah. No, but point is that in that, see, the spanning set what we have written is in terms of positive roots, and here what I am writing is in terms of simple roots. So there could be more than one solution here.
I'm saying up there. So the IJ are all positive integers.
Yes, yeah. If you look at that,
But suppose the combination, suppose the integral combination of the beta is a 0.
hmm,
And because there are positive roots, some of the coefficients have to be negative. Is that right?
no, my point is that it need not be one dimensional. It could be more than one.
Yeah, no, what I'm saying is that number
Yeah.
is precisely the number of ways you can write mu as lambda minus summation ij beta j. Lambda is
Oh, okay. Yeah.
for every different choice you have exactly one combination.
Now what?
Because
It could be less. Some of them may not correspond to anything. So we are not saying that it is universal one. There you will have everything.
What you seem to make sense, right? A positive integer linear combination of positive roots
Right.
cannot be zero unless one dimension.
Therefore, that sort of
Then, so
that says that you can only get mu in one way.
Hmm.
You can only get mu in one way. I think you will have to shut.
No, I don't understand what is your.
I'm saying that
Confusion.
suppose you can get mu in two ways like that,
Hmm.
then that will correspond, that will mean that.
No, I am writing in terms of the simple roots. Yeah. Yeah, but the point is that in general in a module, some of them may not be there. So, because if I want all of this to be there, you will see that this is infinite dimensional. But there could be some part not there, so which will give us finite dimensional also. So we'll construct such models which will be infinite dimensional, but this will be actually in fact kind of a basis. But other standard modules will find by quotient of that, which this part says, F part. It says that the quotient is again standard cyclic of highest weight lambda. Okay. Okay, so let's do, so part D. So part D says that each submodule of V is the direct sum of its weight spaces. So
you show that you use a finite dimensional
yeah. No, I'm saying that for, see, basically it has to be spanned by, okay, look at the spanning set here. If you want a certain weight, you have to only look at the vectors here of that weight. It has to be subspace, it has to be sub of that basically, or quotient of that. So how many vectors can be there of a certain weight here? It's going to be finitely many at most, because that's what we calculated that weight.
Okay, so it's finite dimension.
Yeah,
But you think it's one?
lambda, the highest one is 1. Dimension of v mu is finite, v lambda is 1. So lambda is where we don't have to subtract anything. So that is v plus basically. Okay, so let's prove this. Each submodulo of v is the direct sum of its weight spaces. So suppose I have some module w of v. Now my claim is that if there is a vector here which comes from a different weight spaces, then in fact each weight space is actually there. So suppose I have w in w, and so obviously w is an element of v, and it is sum of weight spaces. Say w belongs to some v lambda 1 plus v lambda r. So that w will look like some v1 plus vr. Then my claim is that each of these vi again belongs to w. This is what you mean by saying it's sum of its weight spaces. Okay, suppose not. Then I can find a minimal expression of this kind. So it's standard proof. So not, then there exists a minimal r greater than 1 such that w is v1 plus vr, obviously, and vi do not belong to w, right? For some I or none of them? Okay. Yeah, for some. No, every I am saying that. I am saying that minimal expression. So none of the component belong to any. So none of the component belong to any weight. I am saying that none of the components are in any weight. The whole thing is not there. I mean, even I can choose that. Right?
Your claim is that every vi belongs to w.
Yeah.
So suppose not should be some vi doesn't belong to w.
So if you have one vi, then you remove it, then it is not a minimal expression, right? So negation should be that none of the vi's are there. Yeah. So that won't be a minimal expression. If I say that,
No, this is not a minimal expression for w, but even for a whole, there is.
yeah, I am looking at the this r.
You have not fixed it.
No, I have not fixed w. I am varying the w. So the minimal expression I have taken something. Okay. So now what? So there will be some. So vi will belong to some different lambda i's. So let's take v1 and v2. v1 belongs to v lambda 1 and v2 belongs to v lambda 2, and one can find lambda 1 are not equal to lambda 2. So one can find some h such that lambda 1 h is not equal to lambda 2 h. So then you make h act on this w. So I will add on two equations, h w. So h of v1 is going to be lambda 1 h v1 VR, and h of W is again in W, because W is a submodule, and then I multiply by lambda 1 h to this equation and subtract. So, I will get a smaller length expression, which will be a contradiction. So, I will multiply this equation by scalar lambda 1 h and subtract. This will give me a contradiction, because I will get a smaller length expression in W. So, that proves that each submodule of V is direct sum of its weight spaces. Okay, let us prove that V is an indecomposable L module with a unique maximal proper submodule. So, take any proper submodule, it does not contain V lambda, that is my claim, because as soon as it contains V lambda means it contains some scalar multiple of V plus, and since it is a module I can apply all V beta i's, and hence it will contain whole V. So, any proper submodule does not contain V plus.
What do you say? Isn't V an irreducible L module by definition?
No, I have said only spanned, it is not, I have not said its basis.
What I mean is the L action on V plus gives you all of V. Oh, so
It spans only. We are only proving that it is invariant, that is all. I mean, it's constructing only submodule. So, any proper submodule always leaves V plus out. So, if I take the direct sum, it still leaves V plus out. So, take direct sum of all proper submodule, that will be a maximal submodule. That is going to be a maximal submodule. And
I mean, the action of V plus alone,
mhm,
and if you add L on V plus,
mhm.
won't it span all of V?
Yeah, it spans. Yeah. But to prove irreducible, you should be able to start from any vector and get everything. And here weight will always go down. So if you start with lower weight vector, you can go down only, you can't go up.
Irreducible definitions of sensible modules characterized by the fact that they have a unique height weight
Finite dimensional one will prove that. That's going to be the theorem tomorrow. We'll come to somewhat theorems like that.
But in V plus is like a unique height weight vector. So
Irreducible one will correspond to some lambda.
is V plus the unique height weight vector? V plus
In where?
in
In this module. Yeah, I mean that's what I proved, it's a one dimensional. But you can take direct sum. So if it is irreducible, then it's unique. But if you can take, you are allowed to take direct sum. There could be different maximal vectors which are not related to each other. So we have not yet constructed such a module. We are just, talking hypothetically that there exists such a module. So we'll do the construction tomorrow. So I'll take 5 more minutes and finish the proof of this. So yeah, so we are talking about the proof of E. So if you take any proper submodule, it doesn't contain V plus, so you can take their direct sum. That will still leave V plus out. And that is going to be maximal, because I have taken direct sum of all proper submodule. So that will give me a maximal submodule. But if you go modulo by maximal submodule, whatever you get is always going to be irreducible. The quotient will be always irreducible module. So there is unique maximal submodule and there is unique irreducible quotient. That is clear. Yeah. And if I take homomorphic image, wherever V plus goes, that is again weight lambda only. So homomorphic image will give me again a standard cyclic module of weight lambda.
Also, I mean, this maximum thing is just a complement of the thing spanned by your V plus.
Maximal.
I don't understand. You leave V plus out,
Mm-hmm.
and then you
No, I am not claiming that if you leave V plus out, whatever is a submodule. I am saying that if at all it is a submodule, proper submodule, it will leave V plus out definitely. It can leave many more things out. That is not sure because it has to be L submodule also. So,
Oh, I see.
yeah. So I am not saying that the complement of V plus is a submodule. That's not clear. That's not true in general.
So how did you, oh, sorry, what did you say?
So I only said that if I have proper submodule, it always leave V plus out. So my claim is that if you take sum of proper submodule, it should not become whole module. So that's why I argued that each one of will leave V plus out. So the even sum will leave V plus out. Yeah. Sum of what? Diane contain V plus. Each one of them Diane contain V plus, and if when the sum contain V plus, and they are each one of them are weight module, right? So use this part. If any one of them contain 1, then it has to contain the whole weight space. So when V lambda was in sum, then it will be in each one of them. Because of this argument, just now we prove this argument. Yeah, it's sum of weight spaces always. Sum module is always sum of weight spaces.
Suppose since finite dimension, we find a dimension, then the submodule will be actually 0. So really, submodule will actually be 0.
What? No.
V is finite dimensional,
V is finite dimensional.
then unique maximum submodule will actually be 0.
Why it has to be 0?
Because complete
If it is not irreducible, it need not be irreducible.
it's indecomposable. This is indecomposable.
Ah.
It is finite dimensional.
Mm-hmm.
It will have to be irreducible.
Yeah, finite dimensional things will be nice always. So we'll do that tomorrow. Because you complete reducibility in that situation. Okay. So I'll stop here.